Just connecting there. So the session is recorded because some people can't make it for today, and this presentation in particular I think is going to be a really valuable resource to all of our Landcare members, so I'd like to record it with your permission. If anyone has any questions throughout, I am facilitating on my own today, so as well as concentrating very deeply on the presentation, I'll be trying to make sure I'm answering any questions throughout. If I do miss anything in the presentation today, I'll make sure that I get back to you on email. I will take a screenshot at some stage just for our reporting purposes as well. And just on reporting and funding, I'd just like to acknowledge the State NRM program and the National Landcare Network, who are the funders of WOLN, and they allow us to be able to facilitate these skills building sessions and other products and services that we provide to our members. So our topic for today is designing a successful and coordinated weed control program using Nature Conservation Margaret River's Arum Lily Blitz as a case study. Our amazing facilitator today is Genevieve Hanran-Smith, who's been advocating for the Margaret River region for well over 2 decades now. She has worked with the Cape Catchments Group, which is now called Nature Conservation Margaret River, since it formed in 2000, in various roles including Education Officer, River Care, Biodiversity, Weed Management Project Officer, Consultant, Manager, Board Member and Chair, which is jack of all trades there. She helped develop the Margaret River Action Plan back in 2003 and has been a really active and committed champion for sustaining the ecological health of the Margaret River region. And we're really lucky to have her insight today on a topic all landcarers can relate to. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Genevieve. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Casey. And hello to everyone who's joined us. I really hope I can provide some information about our project that might be useful for you, both with what we have done and what we could do better. The original title that I put in that Casey mentioned had the word successful in there, but driving around Margaret River at this time of year, I thought it's far too early for us to say whether the Arum Lily Blitz is a successful control program. We're quite a long way from that, but hopefully heading in that direction. So to give you a little bit of background about Arum Lily control in our region, we did begin a targeted control program with landholders across a limited area, which started in 2012. That was following the bushfires that were in Margaret River in November 2011, and there was quite a lot of properties with bushland areas that were burnt in that time. And we got some funding from the federal government through SWIG to support those landholders. And as bush had been burnt, it was the perfect time to get in and do Arum Lily control. And that was our first experience of a really targeted and coordinated approach. And we kept working with those landholders after 2012 in that area, Kilkarna, some of the Margaret River area and Redgate, and we're having a lot of success and getting a better understanding about people's interest in controlling Arum Lily. So we went to the Minister for the Environment in October 2017 to talk about what we were doing on private property and how there was a lot of concern about what was happening on public land in the national park, and that we were really keen to work together across the landscape. And he allocated staff to work with us to develop an Arum Lily management plan for the Margaret River region, which was completed in 2018, which gave us a bit of strategic thinking in terms of where was most important to work and what we needed to do. So we then applied for some state NRM funding to support implementation of that plan, and was successful for a 3-year project, 2019 to 21. That was going so well and so much community interest that we went back to the Minister for the Environment and talked to them again in 2020. And then at that stage, we through that could accessed $100,000 Green Jobs Plan funding for Arum Lily control in the national park, which involved training up and people getting jobs. So it was 4 people that got jobs through that project, and then quite a large budget to do work in the national park over 2 years. And then we applied for another 3 years of state NRM funding to continue the Arum Lily Blitz, and we're now in our 5th year, so that's going to be funded all up at the moment until 2024. And just briefly, the project approach it's sort of got 4 main arms to it. One is that we engage everyone across the whole Margaret River region to better manage Arum Lily, and we do that in a way that is as efficient with limited support, but trying to sort of bring everyone on board. We then, the second prong of that is to target areas that have higher value, and for us that's about biodiversity. So properties that have got high biodiversity values or are close to the national park or other areas with high biodiversity values, we have a targeting engagement with them. We get in contact with them and we give them more support. And I'll explain in more detail these things further on. The third one is to engage with public land managers to motivate and coordinate control on public land. And the fourth arm of that is encouraging and supporting community groups to undertake mapping and control on public land. So there are 4 main avenues of getting the job done. So just quickly, some of the outcomes to date for the project is we have about 1,800 properties that are registered with the Arum Lily Blitz, and that covers about 20,000 hectares. We've provided herbicide in the 4.5 years of the project to 978 people. We asked landholders to give us a report on their work, and we get a percentage of people returning reports, which you would expect. And in the 2019 to 21 period, we had 453 data reports, which was 3,304 hours of control work done on private property by landholders. And the dollar value of that, so over $115,000. We have shared the cost of a spray contractor in the high priority areas with about 100 landholders, with landholders overall having spent $143,000. And then the Yallingup LCDC and the Friends of the Cape to Cape Track, who are the 2 community groups doing most work in the national park, have completed about 913 volunteer hours controlling arum lilies in the park. And then there's been 1,802 hours of control in the national park itself. So it's a quick overview of where things are at with that project. So I thought, and I hope this is going to be useful for people, to go into a little bit more detail about those elements. So what we're going to look at is things that we have done in the project. So setting project aims and guiding principles, building and planning and building partnerships, identifying and addressing barriers to engagement, providing incentives, technical information and advice, communication, and data collection and record keeping. That's the way I've divided up the talk today. So the project aim of the Arum Lily Blitz is very much about improving management across the landscape to protect native vegetation and biodiversity. Arum Lily also affects, agriculture in our region, but that's not our primary focus. The worst of the Arum Lily is along our coastal strip. So we've got a beautiful national park between the capes, and that's very susceptible to Arum Lily in there. And then the adjoining properties to Caves Road, and then west of Caves Road. So it's really impacting on native vegetation and biodiversity. It's like a bulldozer that's just starting to infest and then just getting more and more dense as it just bulldozes into native vegetation, our competing, allow diverse understory. So for us, that's the main aim. And so we're looking at, we're trying to control areas like this where arum lily is invading good quality vegetation. But to do that, we also need to control the enormous seed source that is on quite a lot of private land, which is huge expanses of arum lily under trees. And biodiversity values in those areas are low, but the seed source is enormous, and that is what is just continuing to feed the problem. So we can't just look at our bush, we've got to look at these huge seed sources as well. And there's a lot of areas that look like this. So our guiding principles, things that we always keep in mind as we're making decisions about the project, was that we really need all public and private land managers to take part. Arum lily, like a lot of our weeds, the seeds are spread by birds, so if there's no point control being undertaken in one place and not somewhere else, so it needs to be all land managers. The work really needs to be concerted. The problem is really extensive in our region. We haven't unfortunately got in early to try and address the problem before it gets really, really bad. So to do something about it now, it needs to be a very concerted effort, and it has to be sustained over many years. It's going to take a long time to make progress. In terms of using resources, the more high use of resources needs to go into, targeting areas of the highest biodiversity value. That needs to be thought about in making decisions about where money's spent. Communication is an essential element of the project to drive behaviour change. That's really important. And we need to collect information over time, which enables us to evaluate change and success or otherwise. So I hope I'm going okay so far. Everyone's following all of that okay. What was great for us in doing the small Arum Lily project after the bushfires is we got a good understanding of our community and could really find out a bit more about what were the barriers to them engaging in Arum Lily control. And we learned that landholders felt, well, why should I bother when others in my neighbourhood aren't doing anything about it? And even worse, it's not fair if I control arum lilies and no control is being undertaken by the government in national park and reserves. That was a feeling that was common. Landholders didn't know whether it was actually possible to control arum lilies. There hadn't been a lot of information provided prior to that. They really needed to know how, where to start, how to undertake spraying, what was needed, what contractors could they trust. And a big barrier was that at that time, the recommended herbicide was sold in 1,000-gram containers, when a lot of people only needed 5 to 10 grams to do the work on their properties. So that was identified as a really big barrier. So to start addressing the idea of it needed to be across the landscape and involving public land, as I said, we developed the partnership and the Arum Lily management plan with DBCA, so that was great. We then worked with the Shire of Augusta Margaret River and the City of Busselton and the Margaret River Busselton Tourism Association, who manage a number of sites in the National Park, to develop a partnership, and they supported the first state NRM proposal that we put in. And then we worked hard to develop partnerships with the community groups that I mentioned, the Yallingup LCDC and the Friends of the Cape to Cape Track. What we could have done better, or what would have been very helpful in the planning process, was that if we had had good mapping data to enable prioritisation of the control effort. That in itself is an enormous job to collect that sort of data across the landscape. But looking back, I feel that some of the decisions that we've made would have been different if we really had a good picture of what the issue was, particularly in public land, good quality native vegetation that's reserved. So that would be great. We did collect some data, and there's a couple of examples here. So the one on the left-hand side of the screen is the Yallingup town site. You can see there, and then the national park surrounding it. And that mapping was undertaken by volunteers from the Yallingup LCDC. They're 50 by 50 metre grids, and volunteers put in a lot of time to go out and map the infestation surrounding the Yallingup area. And that was incredibly useful because it's allowed us over the last 5 years to have a plan of action and prioritise control. And at some stage, if the mapping gets done again, we'll be able to evaluate progress. The map on the right was also done by volunteers. That was done by the Friends of the Cape to Cape Track volunteers. Their focus is the Cape to Cape Track itself. And that track is already shared out between a lot of adoptees who manage a section of the track each, doing pruning and other maintenance work. So those volunteers mapped the infestation that's sort of along the track and, into the bush each side of the track from as far as you can sort of see when you're walking. And that mapping also has proven to be very useful in setting priorities and for the Friends of the Cape to Cape Track to work out where their volunteers might be able to undertake control and where you may need a contractor to take control. Basically red on the map, which is shown down the bottom there at the Moses Rock campsite, is where there's a large dense infestation, and that's somewhere where contractors would do the work. So that's some mapping that we had done, but a lot more of that would have been good before we started. And I will talk about the mapping that we do in terms of monitoring where control's undertaken. What has been really helped us to engage people is providing incentives, technical information and advice. That was one of the barriers that were identified. So we wanted people to have the incentive of being part of something. So the Arum Lily Blitz has really been promoted as something to join. That seems to be quite successful in terms of lots of people know about it and feel some obligation to be part of that or wish to. We've provided free herbicide in small quantities, which is, quite a big thing to do, but it's brings a lot of people into the network, and also, addresses that barrier of people not wanting to buy a kilo of herbicide. And that herbicide in small quantities is distributed at 6 outlets across the region. So people can pick it up from our office or Dunsborough Rural or Vast General Store, Quarrumup Agencies, Augusta Hardware and Nutrient Ag Solutions, I think it is in Carradale. So that makes it easy for people. We have equipment that we can loan out to people. And then in areas of high priority, we will share the cost of a contractor with landholders on a 50-50 basis. And we'll organise a contractor to do that work for them as well. We've developed instructions and technical information to help people know what they need to do and to spread the word. And we've provided a list of recommended spray contractors to overcome that barrier of people not being sure what to do. So some examples, an information sheet that can get shared out to people and by neighbours to other people. There's the people from Dunsborough Rural who distributed herbicide for us up in the Dunsborough end. We've got detailed instructions for how you use Arum Lily control and the list of contractors. We've got a video which is spraying instructions, including, information on how to look after your own safety, as well as minimise any impact on the environment, and a video on Arum Lily manual removal, if that's what people are going to try to do. Communication is, incredibly important part of the campaign. It just wouldn't have been at all successful if we hadn't had a really good communication campaign. And it needs to be really concerted, highly visible and sustained. And it's really important to budget that into any project. We've had a small budget for communication, which we've, managed to get quite a lot done with. But, I think it's really important to have a budget for that work. And then each year we've developed an annual communication plan. And in that plan, the different audiences are identified, what messages we need to target those audiences and how we're going to communicate with them. So I think we've had, we have a list of everyone who's registered in the Blitz, so we can send out 2 or 3 newsletters a year directly to them. We have at least 8 media articles in the local paper every year and 16 social media posts. We've had radio interviews, a couple of TV stories. We've got posters up everywhere, banner that is, on the entry into town and in other places. We've done talks to industry groups and community groups. We've run workshops. We have an annual celebration at the end of every year. We can report back to everyone about what we've achieved. And word of mouth, we've found, is increasingly a very important part of the communication.
Can I just interrupt you there, Genevieve?
Yeah.
When you're talking about your communications plan, does that form part of your funding proposal? I'm just wondering how communications can be factored into funding as well for projects.
Yeah, I think you could probably have that. I think actually, it's been a while since I've had a look at the funding application cases, so I can't remember exactly. But I think it probably is one of the outputs, and it should be as well. So, and it's not a big thing. It's not a great big plan or strategy. It's, a table over a couple of pages identifying what you're going to do and who you're aiming to communicate with and how you're going to do it each year.
Great.
And then you can tick that off as the year goes by. So these are some of our champions that have been willing to have their photos in the local paper, speaking to different parts of our community. So we've got, farmers and viticulturalists and someone from the Friends of the Cat Track, rural residential landholders, dairy farmer, small landholders, someone who's done revegetation following Arum Lily control, someone from the Department of Biodiversity, our people supplying the herbicide, people from the local government authority, tourism operators, someone who undertakes the spraying themselves, the CEO of the Margaret River Bustleton Tourism Association. So we've been really grateful for everyone who's willing to have their photo taken and attached to a story targeting a particular message and audience in our local paper and on social media. These are the Yelling Up LCDC volunteers, and I like this one because the first photo on the left is in the first year and they're looking very unhappy, and the last one was in year 3, and I feel like they're looking like they're feeling like they're succeeding on their achievements there. So we have posters up everywhere, a banner, social media posts. So I can't, yeah, for our particular project for the Arum Lily Blitz, which is about engaging, you know, thousands of people across our landscape. It's a large area that we're covering. And yeah, it's all about changing the social norm and changing people's behaviour and expectations about being a good neighbour and, you know, that it's possible to have success and all those messages. And yeah, the communication's been really essential. So another element of the project is the data collection and record keeping. There is quite a lot of information in such a big project, and that is quite a lot of work to keep up with all of that. But I feel like it's really important on a long project, especially one like this. We're talking a 20, 30-year plus project before we can really, you know, see whether we've achieved success. So it's very long term. So we use Airtable for the participant registration. So that's the at the moment about 1,800 people who are registered as being participants in the Arum Lily Blitz, and they can either register themselves online through our website, or when they collect herbicide, that will be a registration. We asked them where did they learn about the Blitz, and you know, have a drop down of a whole lot of options so that we can learn more about our communications and understand where people are getting their messages from. And yeah, it was through that data that I learned how important word of mouth is, and how word of mouth, you know, is really starting to overtake, you know, other things like social media or media in terms of the way that people are finding out about the Blitz. And then we record who collects herbicide, which year they collect it, where they collect it from, and how much they collect. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we also ask landholders to submit data on their work. So that's the number of hours that they spend undertaking control and the number of litres sprayed. And that's another way of giving us a feel for, you know, what's happening.
And I guess all of that information too helps with future funding.
Exactly.
Well, right.
And
keeping all of those records.
It's really good in conversations with public land managers too, because we can demonstrate how much work's been done on private land. And it's a great communication tool too for people to know what progress is being made. And so, yeah, more data collection and record keeping. We use QGIS, and we map all the registered properties so that we can have a really good look across the landscape about who's involved and what gaps there are that we might need to target. And we also on QGIS have a record of all the contractor control. So Arum Lily density is mapped by the contractors prior to them doing the work, and they provide that data to us. The area sprayed is recorded, and the hours of spraying and the litres sprayed. Just as a bit of an example of how, you know, what that mapping might look like, this is an area in the northern part of the Margaret River region, and it's somewhere where there was not really been any targeted engagement. So anyone who registers with the Blitz has heard about it through one of the communication means or from neighbours and friends. So I think that was who came on board in 2019, and then that was 2020, and additional in 2021, and then that was from last year. So that's the mapping, yeah, it's giving us a good feel for what's happening across the landscape there. And that one's quite a good case study for how many people are coming on board, doing the work themselves or paying a contractor themselves to do it, and hearing about it just generally from the communication. This is another example of mapping that's done, shows the areas that the contractors are undertaking spraying from the 3 different colours showing 2019, 20 and 21. So we have a record of that. A way that the hours of work and litres sprayed tell us something about this, about progress, is on this property, for example, in 2019, there was 40 hours of control and 3,000 litres sprayed. And the following year across the property, there was 40 hours again, but 2,670 litres sprayed. And then in 2021, it was still up around almost 40 hours work because it's a large property, but there was only 270 litres sprayed. So that's indicating a really big reduction in the Arum Lily extent across the property. This is some other mapping that we've done. That's an area in the National Park at Moses Rock. And they were 10 by 10 metre quadrants, those ones, mapping density with dark red being the worst and the light being the lower infestation. And then marked in black there is the area that contractors concentrated on in the first year in that project on that site, and then the following up mapping the following year, which shows a really significant reduction for that first lot of spraying. Follow-up, of course, will be required because, yeah, Arum Lily, you would expect at least 20% of the original infestation is going to survive, but generally not be visible until 2 years after the initial spray. So that follow-up 2 years down the track is really, really important. But that's an example of mapping. And that Moses Rock site, that area that was in dark red along the boundary between private property and the park, was that sort of infestation looking like that. As I said, the Arum Lily bulldozer just, you know, marching in and this sort of vegetation, which is what we were trying to protect in these areas, and that is the same before and after. So that mapping, what that mapping, the red to the white looks like in the field is that the following year. But yeah, as I say, there'll, you know, 2 years down the track, there'll be 20% of what was there will be present and need ongoing control needed. More data collection and record keeping, as I was saying, there's quite a lot of work put into that part of the project. So we do photo monitoring at selected sites. We don't do them at every site where there's work. There's just not the resources to do that, but choose representative sites. So that's an example of one the year after spraying. This is the same location before and after. And there's another one there. It's got a dense infestation. You can see where the contractors got to at the end of that spray season. There's that line of Arum lilies there. So photo monitoring is good to give you a good picture of things. So more data collection and record keeping. We've also had a couple of monitoring sites, so we can't monitor in detail across all the area where we're working. So we chose a couple of sites where we were going to put a bit more effort in and collect more information. And that way, yeah, we could learn a lot more from those sites. We can, you know, use them as communication and demonstrate success or otherwise. One of the main sites we've used for that is Point Road, which is down in Baranuk Forest in the Lewin Naturalist National Park. It's that Contours campground up the top, and then in red, that patch there is the Point Road site. Pretty good quality vegetation all around there, and just an arum infestation that was about 25 hectares that was, yeah, just getting denser and denser and spreading in this really good area of vegetation. So we focused on that one. It was funded through the State Arum Lily Blitz project, but we needed to find some matching contribution for that. So we went out to our community and asked some people if they would like to donate funds for that monitoring site, and they did that. So that was great. We mapped the Arum Lily density in 10 by 10 grids. We did some vegetation transects, some photo point monitoring, and we undertook 25 hectares of control. And that the hours litres data there tells quite a bit, a good story about that site too. So we went from 97 hours and 1868 litres to 56 hours and 669 litres to 34 hours and 311 litres in the final year. And then in 2021, there was so little Arum Lily there that spraying didn't get done that year, but some follow-up will occur this year. So that's what the mapping, density mapping for that site looked like before any work was done in 2019. And that's what it looked like in 2020. And that's what it looked like in 2021. It was a really successful Arum Lily control effort there in that particular vegetation community, in the carries and shady environment and a bit damp.
What do you think about that site that made it so successful? Why do you think?
I think it's just the nature of the vegetation type and it being very shady, and the plants are all a bit, soft and easy to kill compared to when they grow in more coastal environments where they're much more robust and they've had to be to survive. I think that's why it's just, shady, it's a bit cool, it's a bit damp, and that seems to be where it's easier to kill arum lilies. So with the transects, it wasn't a big, it was, a minimal sort of monitoring in terms of transects. We had 6 30-metre point intersect transects, so that at every metre you just say, does your tape touch a native, a weed or bare ground? And then on those quadrats, on those transects, we also had 4 2.5 metre squared quadrats where it was a percentage cover of native weeds or bare ground. But that the data that came from those transects demonstrated that there was a 87.8% reduction in arum lily cover after the first year of spraying and a 99.75% reduction after 2 years of spraying. So we were really happy with that. And what was really nice as well is that there was an increase in native vegetation cover after the first year of 3.5 and 23% after 2 years of control. So that was a significant improvement too. And that was sort of the nature of the site, was that there's a lot of existing native vegetation. So there's a lot of seed and it was a good regeneration site. Unfortunately, then we had the fire in November 2021 and that site got burnt. So that's really changed the nature of the vegetation in that area for now, but we're continuing to work there and to monitor there as well. There's a few examples of the photo monitoring of that site. This one's got a third one with it, which shows the amount of regeneration after the second year of spraying, which I was a bit surprised at when I was back doing the monitoring. And that's not necessarily of species diversity. We didn't monitor that. We monitored cover. So that's some examples. Just wondering what the time is, 2:15. Oh, okay, I haven't done too badly. I'd be happy if anyone's got any questions, but before I finish up and we do that, I've, thought a bit now that we're a few years down the track, what could we have done better or do better? And as I've said before, I think better mapping of present and extent of Arum Lily on public land would have enabled better decision making for sure. I look back and some of the areas that control was undertaken probably should have been left until later, with some other higher priorities being dealt with first. But if you don't have the information, you can't make those decisions, and they're things that we've learned as we go. We do know that there's a lot of community interest in our national park and in our reserves, and that there's probably a real opportunity for a citizen science type approach to mapping if you've got the tools to be able to do that. And yeah, we're working with someone with the possibility of having an app that the community can use to undertake Arum Lily mapping as well as other species. And I think that information would be incredibly valuable. I think we were so keen to engage landholders and bring them on board that we probably didn't do a couple of things that we should have. One is that let them know up front that Arum Lily control needs to be sustained over many years. So that message it's no quick fix. You might be able to make a big difference in 2 or 3 years, but given there's so much seed source around, you need to be committed to it into the future as well. And I think probably where we, had a bit of a plan of action with the landholder, and the contractor went out and they worked it out together and they sprayed. What would have been valuable, especially on the larger properties, is to have a plan of action developed with the landholder. So spend some time with the landholder to do a bit of a survey, a bit of mapping, get an understanding of the extent and density across the property, and come up with a plan of action over a number of years and really put that in place before making a start, I think would be good, but requires investment. As with the mapping, you need the resources to be able to do it. And I think, to be really careful not to extend the targeted control too broadly, as follow-up is really essential. Otherwise, you're back to where you started after a few years. So once you commit to a site, commit to it into the longer term and ensure you've got your resources there to do that and not be spreading out too broadly. You continue to work as we have on just putting the information out there and providing the incentives and hoping a lot of people do the work themselves. The project's only going to be successful if everyone does their bit and manages the issue on their own property or public land. And then the last one, it's another hard one because it's to do with funding, but a really long-term commitment of funding to enable a long-term approach is essential to success, because no matter how enthusiastic we all might be about getting in there and doing something about these issues that are having such a damaging impact on our environment, the truth of it is that it all requires a long-term and concerted and sustained approach. I feel like they're things that we've learned as we've gone along. And that's the end of my presentation on the Arum Lily Blitz.
That was awesome, Genevieve. Thanks so much. I've got a couple of questions. What makes the Arum Lily such a persistent weed? What is it about it that causes it to?
It just is, it hasn't got anything that attacks it or eats it. It hasn't got any predators or pests or diseases. It's always really healthy. So that's one of the main problems, is that it came over from South Africa, but it didn't bring with it all the problems that keep it in control over there. Mm-hmm. And then, it seems to really like limestone soils, which we've got lots of on our coastal strip. And yeah, it just is incredibly successful in our region in the southwest, unfortunately. Mm.
And do you have any advice in terms of getting succession funding for these types of projects? Because I think this is what scares a lot of groups, is that they want to tackle an issue and they do for 12 months while they have the money to do so and the resources to do so, and then they're not successful the second round, and all of their hard work has gone down the gurgler a little bit. And I just wondered, what is it about your project that's enticed funding, a continual funding? Is it that you are seeing some really good success?
I think so. I think being able to demonstrate such a big engagement by landholders in the community has got a lot of strength to that. And yeah, the numbers that we've got, and the data shows all of that. I don't know. I was just so happy to get a 3-year project initially. And so to get another 3 years of funding for it, I was just really pleased with. I think the sort of less resource heavy elements of it, which are the broad that prong, which is about engaging the very broad community and just trying to encourage them to take ownership of the issue themselves by providing information and herbicide. I suppose nature conservation feels that can be continued into the future. There'll be some way of making that happen. We've got a really strong team of volunteers that support the Arum Lily Blitz project. So we feel that at least we can continue on that. But in terms of the more resource-heavy component of it, which is the 50-50 cost share element with landholders and the cost share with the Department of Biodiversity and shires in public land, it's of concern whether, we'll continue to get funding for that. But I think demonstrating success is important in terms of getting something funded again, and we're just trying really hard to be able to do that.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Michael?
Mike here, yeah. What herbicide are you using?
We're using chlorsulfuron.
Chlorsulfuron?
Yeah.
Are you using...
Sorry?
Are you using a surfactant with that to really get it in?
Yeah, we are. We're using, pulse or another penetrant.
Oh, okay. All right. Because when you said there might be tougher ones on the coast, my experience on the coast is they're tougher because they need more surfactants to get it in.
Yeah.
They've got a surface which repels.
Yeah.
With the herbicide application, I assume volunteers are also doing that. Are they using herbicide, applying it on local government public land as well as DBCA land?
No, not at the moment.
Only DBCA public areas.
At the moment, it is, yeah.
All right, okay. Because we up where I am, we've got a bit of a problem trying to get permission for volunteers to apply herbicide on public land due to local government public liability issues, because they're very conservative. But it's good that DBCA at least are allowing it.
And I think we had a bit of a head start with DBCA because they had such good volunteers in the park. So the Friends of the Cat Track and Yelling Above CDC have been working, very well-established groups have been working with DBCA for a long time. So that helped take the conversation forward. And then they've got to meet requirements, of course. They need to do training and they've got to report everything they're doing. And
I can understand that. Do we know what the life of the seed bank is?
Of the seed bank?
Of the seed bank in the soil?
Yeah, it's quite short. It's quite short. Seed
that'll help.
in the soil. I think a year, less than a year. So unlike a lot of species, that at least seed doesn't stay, viable in the soil for a long time. Yeah.
Okay. And I think there was bridal creeper down that way too. Is that being tackled, or is that being left in favour of getting the Arum Lily under control?
The bridal creeper, the rust has been effective at keeping the bridal creeper infestations really low. So bridal creeper is still present in our landscape, but it's not, as it used to be before the rust got introduced, where it was, up in among all the trees and spreading and spreading. It still is a problem because of that seed mat, tuber mat that bridal creeper has. So even though we haven't got a lot of leaf and flowers, because the rust is controlling that, it still is impacting on regeneration, natural regeneration, because there's that, big seed mass, tube mass in the soil.
And just, sorry, one final question. How good is the manual weed control for small infestations, isolated clumps, that sort of thing? What do you do? Do you dig them out? How
Yep, you dig them out, but yeah, as the video that we've got showing manual control, they use a sieve in that to, sieve the soil, because there's the tiny little daughter corms that you can hardly see that potentially will break off. So I think it depends a little bit on the age of the plant. If you're digging out young plants, and you'll have a reasonable success, but really established plants, I think you'd have to keep it up, because those daughter corms will break off and be in the soil and maybe not be visible for 2 or 3 years after that event.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, could I just say, firstly, it's a magnificent project. Well done. It's huge.
Oh, thank you, Jane. I know it is huge, and I don't deliver it anymore. And Mike Griffiths, who's the new coordinator, has taken over that project, and it is a large project for him to take on. It is big.
It's very impressive, I think. With the community engagement, do you find that you're supporting the same landholders every year, or do you generally, if someone wants a bit of support in terms of chemical and things like that, do they start doing it and then do they ask for more support in the coming years, or are they happy to then sort of take that on after, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a bit of a combination of those. So we've got new people coming on every year, lots of, hundreds of people each year. And quite a large proportion of them are happy just to take the herbicide and address the problem themselves, or get a contractor to do the work themselves and they pay for it. The people that we have been working with the targeted control in high priority areas with the 50-50 cost share, there are a lot of people that we've been continuing to work with year after year, because, they're generally big properties with high value, and, it's ongoing. But, some of those drop off as we've solved the problem a bit more, or have a year off because, they could go to biannual at least. And then we've had new landholders come on board that we're, and as we get to know, what's where, and we're out and about looking more, we sort of realise where there might be gaps that we need to target, because everyone else around them is working on it and they're not. So it's a bit of a mix between all of that.
No, well done. It's really, really impressive.
Oh, thank you. Well, as I said,
will this presentation be available to all the participants of today? Are you able to send that to me?
The PowerPoint?
Yeah,
of course. And I just, wanted to say, as I said at the very beginning about success, it's early days really to know whether or not we're going to be successful in achieving the aim that we're after. And I think for our organisation, the option of just letting Arum Lily continue to spread and into all our bush and compete our native vegetation just wasn't something we could tolerate. So we decided that we would commit to, it's a social experiment really, to see whether or not we can engage a broader community in working, collaboratively to control the problem in our region. So, it's early days really.
a bit of a Pied Piper mentality too, isn't it? It seems like my neighbour's doing it, so I should be doing it, or I want to have the same results as they do, or yeah. So there's lots of behavioural change stuff happening as well, which is an interesting metric. Kind of hard to report on that, but I'm sure that there's some really positive behavioural change around arum lilies being on properties and the damage that they can do as well.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Is there any other questions for Genevieve before we wrap up? That was that was very informative, so I'm not surprised there's not too many questions afterwards, Genevieve. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and especially to Genevieve for taking time out of her busy afternoon to present to us on the Arum Lily Blitz. I will send through a really short survey. If everyone could spend a couple of minutes just filling that out. It's just great for us to have some feedback and for us to report to our funding bodies as well on the success or not of the events that we run. Our next Landcare Checks-In is going to be on the Tuesday, the 10th of October, and it's focused on how WA Landcare Network can help you do your landcare job. So we'll be talking about what WALN does to support and build capacity of its membership, the products and services that we have, our insurance scheme that's available to members, and how WALN members can access that, and just the value of being part of the collective Landcare voice in WA. So it's an opportunity for members to ask questions, and if you know of anyone that's not a Landcare member that might be interested, that's a good opportunity for them to check in with us. And it's a bit of a Q&A session with myself, Jack, a few of our members, and our chair, Mick Davis, as well. So hopefully we can see you all there. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. I'm just going to stop recording now, if that's okay.